The bullet whizzed past Clara Bennett's ear so close she felt the heat of it. And in that split second before she dove behind the water trough, she knew her carefully constructed life in Prescott, Arizona was about to shatter like glass. It was the spring of 1884, and the dusty main street of this growing territorial town had been her sanctuary for 3 years, ever since she had arrived with nothing but a worn carpetbag and a heart full of secrets. She had found work at the Mercantile, rented a small room above the bakery, and told everyone who asked that she was an orphan from Kansas City. No one questioned her story because Clara had learned early how to make herself forgettable, how to blend into the background like sage in the desert. But the man firing shots from across the street was not here by accident, and the words he shouted made her blood run cold. "Clara Maddox, I know who you are. Your daddy sends his regards from hell." The name Maddox felt like a brand searing her skin. She had not heard it spoken aloud in years, had not allowed herself to think it, had buried it so deep she sometimes believed her own lies. But here it was, dragged into the sunlight like a corpse, and with it came all the things she had run from. Through the slats of the water trough she could see people scattering, diving into doorways and behind barrels. She heard the marshal shouting, heard more gunfire, and then a different sound, the thunder of hooves, and a voice she did not recognize calling out with authority that cut through the chaos. "Drop your weapon, or I will drop you where you stand." Clara risked a glance and saw a tall cowboy on a paint horse, his rifle aimed steady at the gunman. The cowboy wore a battered hat pushed back from his face, revealing sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. There was something in his posture, a confidence that came not from recklessness but from competence, and when the gunman foolishly swung his pistol toward this newcomer, the cowboy fired once. The shot was precise, hitting the man's gun hand and sending the weapon spinning into the dirt. The gunman howled and clutched his bleeding hand, dropping to his knees. The marshal and his deputy rushed forward to secure the would-be killer, and the street began to buzz with nervous chatter as people emerged from their hiding places. Clara stayed behind the water trough, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. She needed to run, needed to disappear before anyone started asking questions, but her legs would not cooperate. She was still crouched there when Boots appeared in her line of vision, scuffed leather with worn spurs, and then the cowboy was crouching down beside her. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" His voice was low and steady, the kind of voice that could calm spooked horses. Up close, she could see a scar along his jawline and the faint lines around his eyes that came from squinting into too many sunsets. He was perhaps 25 or 26, she guessed, only a few years older than her own 22. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice shook. "Thank you for your help." "That man seemed to know you." It was not quite a question, but his gray eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. She did not, though. Clara had learned that looking away was as good as a confession. He was mistaken. "My name is Clara Bennett, and I have never seen him before in my life." The lie came smoothly, practiced, but even as she spoke it, she saw something flicker in the cowboy's expression. Not disbelief exactly, but awareness. He knew she was lying, and he was choosing not to call her on it. "Well, Miss Bennett, I'm Cole Harrison. I just signed on as a hand at the Triple Creek Ranch, about 10 miles west of here." He stood and offered her his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, and he pulled her to her feet with an easy strength. "If that man was mistaken, then you have nothing to worry about. But if he was not, you might want to consider that someone is looking for you and they might send others." The words sent ice through her veins, but she kept her expression neutral. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Harrison, but as I said, it was a case of mistaken identity." He tipped his hat, but those storm-gray eyes held hers for a moment longer. "If you say so, ma'am. But if you ever need help, Triple Creek is an easy ride. Ask for me." Then he swung back onto his horse and rode away, leaving Clara standing in the street with dust settling around her and the weight of her past pressing down like a boulder. She went back to work at the mercantile, but her hands shook as she measured out flour and weighed nails. Mr. Peterson, the owner, kept giving her concerned glances and finally sent her home early, telling her she had been through a terrible fright and needed rest. Clara did not argue. She climbed the narrow stairs to her room, locked the door, and sat on the edge of her bed staring at the bare walls. The gunman's words echoed in her mind. "Your daddy sends his regards from hell," which meant someone knew that Jack Maddox was dead, and someone knew she was his daughter. Jack Maddox, the outlaw who had terrorized the Arizona and New Mexico territories for a decade, who had robbed banks and stagecoaches and left a trail of blood behind him. Jack Maddox, who had been shot down by a posse 5 years ago and died in the dirt like the dog he was. Clara had been 17 when she learned of his death, and she had felt nothing but relief. She had never known her father, not really. Her mother, Anna, had been a saloon girl in Tombstone when she caught Jack's eye. He had stayed long enough to get her with child, then disappeared back into the lawless country he called home. Anna had tried to make a life for them, moving from town to town, taking whatever work she could find. She had never told anyone who Clara's father was, had made Clara swear to keep the secret. When Clara was 15, her mother died of fever, and Clara was left alone with a name she could not speak and a legacy of violence she had never asked for. For 2 years she had drifted, working in kitchens and laundries, always moving, always afraid that someone would look at her and see Jack Maddox's eyes staring back at them. Then she heard he was dead, and she thought maybe finally she could stop running. She had come to Prescott, changed her last name, and built a quiet life, but quiet lives could be shattered, and now she had to decide what to do. Over the next week, Clara waited for more trouble, but none came. The gunman, whose name turned out to be Pete Cormack, was in the doctor's care under guard, and the marshal sent word that he would hang for attempted murder once his hand healed enough to stand trial. Clara should have felt safe, but she did not. Pete Cormack had not acted alone. Someone had sent him, someone who knew her secret, and they might send others. She found herself thinking about Cole Harrison more than she wanted to admit. The way he had looked at her, steady and unafraid, the way he had offered help without demanding explanations. She told herself it was foolish to dwell on a man she had met for mere minutes, but his face kept appearing in her thoughts, especially late at night when sleep would not come. 10 days after the shooting, Clara was locking up the mercantile when she saw him riding down the street. Cole Harrison sat easy in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the evening sun, and when he spotted her, he guided his horse over and dismounted. "Miss Bennett, good to see you are well." "Mr. Harrison." She was surprised by how glad she was to see him and immediately suspicious of that gladness. She had learned not to trust easily, not to let people close. "I was wondering if I might buy you supper." He said it plainly, without artifice. "There is a decent restaurant down the street, and I have been eating ranch chow for 10 days straight. I could use the company and a proper meal." She should say no. Every instinct told her to keep her distance, to not let anyone into her carefully guarded life. But there was something about Cole Harrison that made her want to say yes, and before she could think better of it, she did. They ate at a small restaurant run by a Mexican family, and the food was indeed excellent, spicy, and rich. Cole talked easily, telling her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, learning to rope and ride almost before he could walk. His father had died when he was young, and his mother had remarried a man who did not want another man's son around, so Cole had struck out on his own at 16. "I have worked ranches from Texas to Montana," he said, cutting into a piece of beef. "Seen a lot of country, met a lot of people, figured it was time to settle somewhere for a while, and I heard the Triple Creek was a good outfit." "Do you like it here?" Clara asked, grateful to talk about something other than herself. "I do. The land is hard but beautiful. The work is honest. And the town seems decent enough, though it has its share of trouble, I reckon." His eyes met hers, and there was a question in them, but he did not ask it. Instead, she found herself saying, "I grew up moving around a lot. Never stayed in one place long enough to call it home. This is the first place that has felt like it could be." "Could be," he repeated. "But you are not sure?" She set down her fork and looked at him directly. Mr. Harrison, why did you ask me to supper? You do not know me. For all you know, that man who tried to kill me had good reason. Did he? Cole's voice was calm, but his gaze was sharp. No, she said quietly, but you do not know that. I know that you have been working at Peterson's Mercantile for 3 years, that you are honest and hardworking, that you go to church most Sundays, and that the ladies in town say you are kind but keep to yourself. I asked around. He said it without apology. And I know that when I saw you behind that water trough, you were not just scared. You were resigned, like you had been expecting trouble to find you eventually. That tells me you are running from something, but it does not tell me you are bad. Clara's throat tightened. You should not be sitting here with me. If people knew what? That you have a past? We all have pasts, Miss Bennett. The question is what we do with them. She wanted to tell him everything, wanted to pour out the whole ugly story, but the words stuck. She had kept the secret for so long that it felt like part of her bones, impossible to extract without breaking herself apart. Instead, she said, some pasts do not let go easily. Then maybe you need someone to help you fight them off. He reached across the table and laid his hand over hers, and the warmth of it spread through her like whiskey. I am a pretty good fighter, as it happens. She pulled her hand back, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. You do not know what you are offering. Then tell me. But she could not yet. Instead, she thanked him for supper and walked back to her room alone, feeling his eyes on her back the whole way. Cole started coming to town regularly after that, always finding an excuse to stop by the Mercantile. He needed supplies for the ranch, or he was picking up an order, or he was just passing through. Clara knew what he was doing, and part of her wanted to tell him to stop, to save himself the trouble of getting tangled up with her. But another part, a part she had kept locked away for years, craved his presence like water in the desert. They fell into an easy rhythm. He would come by in the late afternoon and they would talk while she swept the floor or organized shelves. He told her about the horses he was training, about the vast sky over the ranch, about the way the desert bloomed after rain. She told him carefully edited stories about her childhood, leaving out the important parts, and he listened like every word mattered. One evening in early June, he asked her to go riding with him on her day off. She hesitated, but the longing in his eyes matched the longing in her chest, and she found herself agreeing. He arrived on Sunday afternoon with a gentle mare for her, and they rode out into the hills beyond town. The land was painted in shades of gold and red, with saguaro cacti standing like sentinels, and the distant mountains purple against the sky. They stopped beside a creek, and Cole helped her down from the horse. His hands lingered on her waist, and when she looked up at him, she saw something in his face that made her breath catch. Clara, he said, and the way he spoke her name felt like a prayer. I know you are hiding something. I know you were scared. But I need you to know that whatever it is, it does not change how I feel about you. You do not know what you are saying. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know exactly what I'm saying. I am saying that I have been half in love with you since the moment I saw you crouch behind that water trough, looking like you wanted to fight the whole world. I am saying that I do not care what your past is because I see who you are now, and that is the person I want to know. Tears burned in her eyes and she turned away, but he caught her hand and pulled her back. Cole, my father was Jack Maddox. The words fell between them like stones into water, sending ripples through everything. She watched his face, waiting for the horror, the disgust, the fear. But what she saw instead was understanding and then determination. The outlaw? He said slowly. Yes. He robbed and killed and destroyed lives, and his blood runs in my veins. I am his daughter, the hidden daughter no one knew existed. And if people find out, they will hate me. They will blame me for what he did and the men he wronged, the families he hurt. They might come after me for revenge. That is why Pete Cormack tried to kill me. Someone found out who I am, and they want to punish me for my father's sins. Cole was quiet for a long moment, and Clara felt the fragile hope in her chest begin to crumble. But then he stepped closer and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears she had not realized were falling. "Your past does not scare me," he said, and his voice was fierce with certainty. "You are not responsible for what your father did. You are not him, and anyone who tries to hurt you because of his crimes will have to go through me first." "Cole, I mean it, Clara. I do not care who your father was. I care who you are, and you are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever met. You survived things that would have broken most people, and you made a good life for yourself. That is what matters." She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. "People will not see it that way. Then we will show them. Together." He leaned down and kissed her, soft and sweet, and Clara felt something break open inside her, something that had been locked tight for years. She kissed him back, pouring all her fear and hope and longing into it, and when they finally pulled apart, she was shaking. "I am scared," she admitted. "I know. But you do not have to be scared alone anymore." They sat by the creek as the sun set, and Clara told him everything. About her mother, about growing up in the shadow of a name she could not speak, about the relief she had felt when Jack Maddox died, and the fear that had never quite left her. Cole listened to all of it, his arm around her shoulders, and when she finished, he kissed her forehead and said, "Thank you for trusting me." Over the following weeks, Cole courted her properly, and Clara let herself feel happiness for the first time in her life. They went on rides through the desert, had picnics beside hidden springs, and talked about everything and nothing. He was patient with her, understanding that trust did not come easily, and he never pushed for more than she was ready to give. But the shadow of her past was not done with her yet. In late July, a man arrived in Prescott asking questions about Clara Bennett. He was a private detective from Denver, hired by the family of a bank clerk Jack Maddox had killed during a robbery in 1879. The family had recently learned that Jack had a daughter, and they wanted to find her, wanted to make her pay for their loss. The marshal, a fair man named Garrett, sent word to Clara warning her of the detective. She met with him in the marshal's office, Cole by her side, and faced the man who wanted to destroy her. The detective was middle-aged with cold eyes and a thin mouth. He looked at Clara like she was something dirty. "Miss Maddox," he said, deliberately using the name she had abandoned. "My name is Clara Bennett," she said quietly, "and I had nothing to do with my father's crimes. Your father killed Thomas Hendricks in cold blood during a bank robbery. He left behind a wife and 3 children. You are his blood. You should pay for what he did." "She was a child when her father committed his crimes," Cole said, his voice hard, "and she never even knew him. What you are proposing is not justice. It is revenge against an innocent woman." "The law sees it differently," the detective said. "There are civil suits that can be brought. The Hendricks family wants compensation." Marshal Garrett cleared his throat. "Unless you can prove that Miss Bennett profited from her father's crimes, there is no legal basis for a suit. And I have investigated. She arrived in Prescott with nothing, and she has earned every penny she has through honest work. You are wasting your time and the Hendricks family's money." The detective glared at the marshal, then at Clara. "This is not over. People have a right to know who you are." "Then tell them," Clara said, and the words surprised even her. "Tell them I am Jack Maddox's daughter. Tell them I spent my whole life running from a man I never knew. Tell them I have tried to be good, to be honest, to make up for sins I did not commit, and then let them judge me for who I am, not who he was." The detective sneered and left, and Clara felt the weight of her decision settle over her. Cole took her hand, squeezing gently. "That was brave." "It was necessary," she said. "I am tired of hiding. If I am going to build a life here, it has to be built on truth." The detective made good on his threat. Within days, everyone in Prescott knew that Clara Bennett was really Clara Maddox, daughter of the notorious Outlaw. The reaction was mixed. Some people looked at her with suspicion, crossing the street to avoid her. Others, who had known her for years, defended her. Mr. Peterson told anyone who would listen that Clara was the most honest employee he had ever had. The preacher reminded his congregation that children were not responsible for their parents' sins, and Cole stood by her side through all of it, his presence a steady anchor. But not everyone was willing to forgive. One evening, as Clara was closing the mercantile, 3 men blocked her path. They were ranch hands from a spread south of town, and they had been drinking. The leader, a burly man with a scarred face, sneered at her. "So you are the outlaw's daughter. Your daddy robbed my uncle, killed him for sport. Maybe we should show you what that feels like." Clara's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "I am sorry for your uncle's death, but I had nothing to do with it." "Your blood is tainted," another man said. "You should not be allowed to walk the streets like decent folk." They moved closer, and Clara saw the intent in their eyes. She was reaching for the derringer she had started carrying when a familiar voice cut through the tension. "That is far enough." Cole stepped out of the shadows, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "The lady said she had nothing to do with her father's crimes, and she is right. Now you can walk away, or we can settle this another way." The scarred man looked at Cole, weighing his options. "This is not your fight, cowboy. It is when you threaten someone I care about, and I am not alone." Other figures emerged from the gathering dusk, Mr. Peterson holding a shotgun, the blacksmith carrying a hammer, 2 other cowboys from the Triple Creek Ranch, even the preacher, unarmed but resolute. "Clara has been a good neighbor and friend to this town, Mr. Peterson said. "She does not deserve to be punished for her father's crimes, and we will not stand by and let you harm her." The scarred man looked around, seeing he was outnumbered, and spat in the dirt. "This is not over," he said, but he and his companions backed away and disappeared into the night. Clara was shaking, and Cole pulled her into his arms. "It is all right, you are safe." "How did you know?" she whispered. "I've been keeping an eye on you since that detective left town. I figured some people might cause trouble." He looked down at her, his gray eyes soft. "I told you, Clara, your past does not scare me, and I will not let anyone hurt you because of it." That night, Cole asked her to marry him. They were sitting on the porch of her rooming house, the stars bright overhead, and he took her hand and said, "I know this is not the easiest time, and I know people are making your life difficult, but I love you, Clara. I want to spend my life with you if you will have me. Cole, if you marry me, you will be tied to my reputation. People will judge you too. Let them. I do not care what people think. I care about you and about the life we can build together." He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "It is not much, but it is honest, like you. Say yes, Clara. Say you will be my wife." She looked at this man who had shown her what it meant to be loved without conditions, who had stood by her when everyone else would have walked away, and she knew there was only one answer she could give. "Yes," she said, and when he slipped the ring onto her finger, she felt like she was finally home. They were married in late August in the small church on the edge of town. Some people stayed away, but more came than Clara had expected. Mr. Peterson gave her away, and the preacher spoke about redemption and forgiveness. Cole's friends from the Triple Creek Ranch filled the pews, and when Cole said his vows, his voice was strong and sure. "I take you, Clara, for who you are and who you will become. Your past does not scare me, and your future is mine. I will stand by you, protect you, and love you all my days." Clara's vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. "I take you, Cole, and I promise to be worthy of your faith in me. You have given me hope when I had none, and I will love you until my last breath." They moved into a small house on the edge of the Triple Creek Ranch, a cozy place with a porch that faced the sunset. Clara continued to work at the mercantile, and Cole worked the ranch, training horses and managing cattle. Life was not always easy. There were still people who looked at Clara with suspicion, still whispers that followed her. But there were also people who saw her for who she was. And slowly, the whispers grew quieter. In the spring of 1885, Clara discovered she was with child. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She confided her fears to Cole one night as they sat on their porch watching the stars. What if the baby inherits my father's darkness? What if there is something wrong in my blood? Cole took her hand and pressed it to his heart. There is nothing wrong with you, Clara, and there will be nothing wrong with our child. We will raise him or her with love and honesty, and we will teach them to be good. That is all we can do, and it is enough. Their son was born in late October, a healthy boy with Cole's gray eyes and Clara's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after the bank clerk Jack Maddox had killed, a gesture of atonement that Clara hoped might bring some peace. When she held her son for the first time, she felt a completeness she had never known, and she wept with gratitude for the second chance she had been given. The years passed, and the Harrison family grew. A daughter named Anna came 2 years after Thomas, and then another son they called Samuel. The children grew up knowing their mother's story, told in age-appropriate ways, and they learned that people were more than their worst moments, that redemption was possible, and that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Clara became a respected member of the community, known for her charity work and her kindness. She started a fund to help widows and orphans using the money she had saved from years of frugal living. It was her way of trying to balance the scales to bring some good from the legacy of pain her father had left behind. Cole remained her constant supporter, her partner in all things. He never once made her feel ashamed of her past, and he taught their children that their mother was the bravest person he knew. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they rode out to the creek where he had first kissed her, and Clara looked at the man beside her and felt overwhelming gratitude. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Marrying me, I mean. Taking on all the complications that came with it." Cole looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Regret it? Clara, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and the children are my world. I meant what I said that day by the creek. Your past does not scare me. It never has." "I know," she said, leaning into him, "but I needed to hear it again." "Then I will tell you every day for the rest of our lives." He kissed her, soft and deep, and Clara knew that she had finally found what she had been searching for all those years. Not just safety, not just acceptance, but genuine love, the kind that saw all of her and chose her anyway. By the time Clara was in her 40s, the name Maddox had lost much of its sting. A new generation had grown up hearing stories of Clara Harrison, the woman who overcame her father's legacy to become a pillar of the community. The old-timers still remembered, but even they had to admit that she had proven herself 1,000 times over. Thomas grew up to be a lawyer, dedicated to justice and fairness. Anna became a teacher, passionate about giving children the education and opportunities Clara had never had. Samuel took over the ranch with Cole, learning the land and the horses with the same patience his father had shown. Clara watched her children flourish and felt a peace she had never thought possible. One evening in 1904, Clara and Cole sat on their porch, now old and weathered but still sturdy, watching the sun set over the Arizona desert. They were in their 60s now, their hair gray and their bodies slower, but the love between them had only deepened with time. "Do you remember the first time we sat here?" Clara asked, her hand in his. "I remember everything about you," Cole said. "Every moment, every word, every touch. I was so scared back then, scared of my past, scared of the future, scared of letting anyone close. And now? Now I am just grateful. For you, for our children, for this life we built together. You saved me, Cole." He shook his head. "No, Clara, you saved yourself. I just had the good sense to stand by you while you did it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to orange to purple. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, Thomas's twin boys racing through the yard while Anna's daughter tried to keep up. The sound of their laughter was like music, proof that the cycle of violence and shame had been broken, that love and determination could rewrite even the darkest stories. Clara thought about the frightened girl she had been hiding behind a water trough and waiting for the bullet that would end her carefully constructed life. She thought about the outlaw's daughter no one knew existed, carrying a secret that felt like poison. And then she thought about the woman she had become, the mother and grandmother, the wife of a good man, the friend and neighbor who had earned her place through years of honest living. It had not been easy. There had been times when she wanted to give up, when the weight of her father's sins felt too heavy to carry. But Cole had been there every step of the way, reminding her that she was more than her bloodline, that she had the power to choose who she wanted to be, and she had chosen love, chosen honesty, chosen to believe that redemption was possible. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge, Cole squeezed her hand. "I love you, Clara Harrison. Today, tomorrow, and always." "I love you too," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "Thank you for not being scared of my past. Thank you for seeing me." "It was the easiest thing I ever did," he said simply. They stayed on the porch until the children called them in for supper, and as Clara stood and brushed off her skirt, she looked out at the land she had come to love, the desert that had witnessed her transformation from frightened fugitive to beloved matriarch. She thought about the long road she had traveled, the obstacles she had overcome, and the man who had walked beside her through it all. She was the outlaw's hidden daughter, but that was only part of her story. She was also Cole Harrison's wife, the mother of 3 remarkable children, the grandmother of 5 beautiful grandchildren, and a woman who had proven that the past did not have to define the future. She had built a life worth living, a legacy worth leaving, and she had done it with courage, determination, and the unwavering support of a cowboy who had looked at her darkest secrets and said without hesitation that they did not scare him. As they walked inside together, Clara sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the second chances life had given her, for the love that had healed her wounded heart, and for the family that surrounded her with warmth and acceptance. She had spent so many years running from her father's shadow, but she had finally stepped into the light, and it was more beautiful than she ever could have imagined. The years continued to unfold gently for the Harrison family. Cole and Clara grew old together with grace, their love a constant that never wavered. They celebrated birthdays and holidays surrounded by their growing family, and the little house on the edge of the Triple Creek Ranch became a gathering place for multiple generations. When Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Clara grieved deeply, but without regret. They had been married for 42 years, and every one of those years had been a gift. She buried him on a hillside overlooking the ranch, where he could watch the horses he had loved so much. And she visited his grave every week, talking to him about their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, knowing somehow that he could hear her. Clara lived another 6 years after Cole's passing, long enough to see her youngest grandchild married, long enough to hold her first great-great-grandchild. She remained sharp and engaged until the very end, still doing charity work, still telling stories about the old days, still inspiring people with her resilience and grace. When Clara died at the age of 84, the entire town of Prescott turned out for her funeral. The church was packed with people whose lives she had touched, and the stories they told painted a picture of a woman who had overcome impossible odds to become a force for good in her community. The preacher spoke about redemption and forgiveness, about the power of love to transform lives, and about the legacy Clara had left behind. She was buried next to Cole, and on her headstone, Thomas had inscribed words that captured the essence of who his mother had been: Clara Harrison, beloved wife, mother, and friend. She proved that our choices matter more than our blood. The outlaw's hidden daughter had become a legend of a different kind, not for the violence and crime that had marked her father's life, but for the courage and compassion that had defined her own. Her story was passed down through generations, a reminder that no one was beyond redemption, that love could conquer fear, and that the past, no matter how dark, did not have to determine the future. And somewhere in the vast Arizona sky, perhaps Cole and Clara were together again, riding through endless golden deserts, their love eternal and unshakable, their story complete. They had faced down the demons of the past and built something beautiful in their place, and in doing so they had proven that the most powerful force in the world was not violence or revenge, but love, steadfast and true, that refused to be scared away by anything,